Hi, my name's Fatih, and I'm going to talk today about how to properly validate your startup idea by using a pre-launch landing page. Just a little bit of context about me. I've been the head of growth at EuroVPS.com since 2007 and recently founded GrowthMentor in 2018. For this talk, I'll use the validation work I did for GrowthMentor as an example to keep it interesting. So, all right, step number one in validation is just making sure that your problem is crystal clear. It's a really super common mistake to get really excited about the solution that you thought of and kind of forgetting about why you're even doing it in the first place, what the pain point is that you're trying to solve. But many times we don't think about that because it's our baby, right? It's our idea, and that's what we're really focused on. But that's a really grave mistake because people don't buy products because they want to buy products. They buy products because it helps solve their problems. And oftentimes, founders of startups that actually have better solutions than some of the competitors end up failing and losing out to other competitors who might have inferior solutions but are just quite simply better at communicating the problem. So how do you communicate the problem in the best kind of way, which is step number one if you're starting from scratch, you got an idea. And that's by creating a problem statement. So problem statement is pretty simple. You just say, write down on a piece of paper or a Google Doc, what is the actual problem that you're solving? Who has this problem? And why is this a problem? Now, this problem statement will probably evolve as you do more user testing and research, and as you talk to more people who have similar problem to you. Uh, so, yeah, so you've got your problem statement all written up. Let's begin. Finding the problem is pretty straightforward, actually, because it's usually your own problem as a founder. That's how it started with me. I had a problem. I really couldn't find other people in growth to have chats with and bounce ideas, and I got a little bit lonely. So it's like, all right, maybe we can do something here. But remember, though, that you as a human being, you're inherently flawed in the sense that you're not rational. Nobody's really that rational. We're all kind of emotional beings. So you need to just be wary and mindful that you do have cognitive biases. And a very powerful one that doesn't help at this early stage is confirmation bias, thinking that it's for you a problem, so probably it's going to be a problem for everybody else, and then cherry picking the information that kind of supports that hypothesis. So it really takes a lot of effort to you have to be mindful of that, and you have to fight that. But yeah, step one really is just get your idea out on a piece of paper. This is actually the first wireframe that I made for Growth Mentor. It's actually funny kind of how things turned out. I see a lot of things that actually came to fruition and some that didn't from that. But at this stage over here, just be free flowing. Don't feel constricted whatsoever. Anything that comes to mind, write it down. Whether it's business model ideas, take notes also on your sitemap, on your information architecture. Any blog post ideas, if you can map it to various stages of the funnel, top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, do that. And yeah, basically like a little mini go-to-market strategy time, right? So paper is your friend at this early stage. Sleep on it for a couple of days if you want, but at some point when you're ready, it's time to put it on digital, right? And that's when you have to start wireframing. And the reason you have to do this is because you want to share it, right? You want to validate it, so you want to share it with the right people, and you can't be sending your wireframes in the post, right? So the good news is that anybody can learn how to wireframe. There are tools out there like Balsamiq, Go Mockingbirds. You can use Paint if you really want, if you don't want to pay for anything else. But it's critical that as a founder or a growth marketer, even, that you become adept at wireframing, because it allows you to think very like high level and conceptually about the ideas that you want to communicate without getting sidetracked by design minutia like colors and images, or especially if you're not a designer, these are things you're not really equipped to deal with anyway, so why bother, right? The biggest tip I have for this stage here, when you're wireframing your pre-launch page, is to use actual content. Try and avoid like ipsum dolorum and things like that. The whole goal here is to get super focused and specific on communicating the problem that you're hoping to solve with your product, and overlaying your solution over it, and hopefully getting some sort of a reaction from your ideal customer persona that's going to land on this page. In terms of like inspiration, at this stage, I like to go on Landing Folio and look at other websites in the space, in different industries even, and get inspiration on layouts. And so once you finish with this, pass it to your designer, or if you want to do it yourself, go for it. And it's time to make that landing page, your pre-launch page. So the goal of a pre-launch page is to do what? It's to communicate A, what this product is, B, who is it for, and C, the problem that it's going to solve, right? And doing all of this whilst also simultaneously being completely transparent that this product does not yet exist. It is either being built or we're thinking about building it. And just put your email address in here, and if you're interested, and we'll get back to you. Now, I see there's this trend of making dummy products, where the landing page gives the false impression that the product actually is in existence, and it collects the leads, and then the first email back on the auto responder is, hey, thanks for subscribing, but this doesn't really exist yet. Kind of like, psych. I'm not really a fan of that. I'm more like, hey, let's just be honest with our intentions here. But it does have a higher conversion rate. So if you want to, you can try that out as well. But in terms of the goal here, it's to get emails, right, and then to nurture them and to reach out to them and do research and to validate that this is something that people want. The more people subscribe, the higher the chances that your hypothesis is going to be validated, and that this might be a pretty good solution. And because this is kind of like a make or break point, I want to go all out personally on design and conversion rate optimization at this stage, because I don't want that nagging thought in the back of my head to be like, hey, maybe this validation campaign didn't work out because your design sucked, or it wasn't properly optimized for conversions. So like all of the designs that I do whenever I want to validate something, it's pure custom made. I've got a designer that I've been working with for 11 years. He's amazing, Alec Manoff. He's actually a mentor on GrowthMentor. So for me, it's pretty easy because I do have a designer. If you don't have a designer though, and you don't know how to code, or maybe you just don't have the budget to pay for PSD to HTML splicer, you can use tools like Unbounce. Unbounce is pretty good. You can make pretty decent landing pages using that in a very short amount of time. Another really popular one is Webflow that a lot of people are using, and you can use that to actually even create your MVP later, but that's for a different talk. Whatever you do though, just make sure that the page looks really good. And just remember that visuals, this is a really good stat that I hear being thrown around all the time, 60,000 times faster than text it gets processed, right? So instantly, so you look at the site, you get these like subconscious cues on whether this is a credible company, and if it's something that you're willing to put your email address in. So make the design really good, communicate the pain solution fit, make it super focused, super clear who exactly the ideal person for the solution is, and get those emails. And how are you going to get those emails? Like I always recommend using PPC in this earlier stage, but if you don't have the money for PPC, you can skip this. There's our solutions. You can push traffic to your pre-launch landing page by posting about your idea on Slack workspaces, micro communities, Reddit, beta list if you want, although it's probably not at this point because beta list, you need a beta. Indie hackers, I've had really good success with indie hackers. And then there's Facebook groups, LinkedIn, cold email outreach. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. I with GrowthMentor, I did the combination of both. So I did all of that stuff, but I also pushed $500 worth of budget. That was like my top budget. I was like, I'm going to spend $500 on AdWords, Google Ads, to validate and see if I can get any conversions. And I chose Google Ads over Facebook Ads because you can really set the buyer intent based on what keywords you're looking for. So I bid for like looking for business mentors, or growth marketing mentors, variety of different long tail keywords that displayed the intent to actually look for a business mentor versus experimenting around with interest groups on Facebook ads, or playing around with demographics, because that does take a little bit of time, and I just quite honestly didn't really have that at that moment. So keep in mind though that it does take some time to get results. So leave 1 to 2 weeks as a bare minimum to get any sort of statistical significance, unless you have a higher budget. So generally, the more money you splash on PPC, the less time it takes to get those results. So data doesn't really lie, which is why I love data-driven growth marketing. And if your conversion rates are low, or worst, non-existent, then probably you might need to reconsider your positioning, your product messaging, or maybe your entire sort of hypothesis or business model. But if your conversion rates are good, which thankfully I had 16.89% conversion rate on this campaign, then great, you're one step closer to validating your startup idea. So in this case here, I spent €418, got 75 conversions on that lead form, for a total cost per lead of €5.57, which was well above what I thought I would. Better than my expectations. But on the flip side, I was a little bit nervous because there really wasn't a paywall, and is this true validation if there's no money being exchanged? But at the end of the day, we're prioritizing learning over revenue over here, and 75 leads for me was pretty good. But it doesn't really end over here on the top of funnel. So the bottom of funnel goal for me, and I always recommend people do this if they have a pre-launch page, is to continue the data extraction through a form. I use Typeform, really big fan. And the first email that they would get, the autoresponder was, "Hey, thanks for signing up to the pre-launch. You're going to get free lifetime membership, but just please fill in this form. We need a little bit more information," right? So some of the questions that we asked were, what are your biggest pain points in growth? And that was an open-ended text field that they could write free form. What are you currently getting mentorship at any other platforms? So if you want to validate something, you have a SaaS tool that's in one certain vertical, which ask them, what other tools are you using to solve this pain point, right? Another question which I always recommend is how much would you be willing to pay for a solution like this? In our case, it was how much money would you be willing to pay to speak to a mentor on an hourly basis? And from the data that we got, generally, I noticed that the respondents would put a much higher rate than in reality what they ended up being willing to pay. But yeah, so that's the stage here. Moving forwards. Yes, one more thing. When I initially did this test of this validation, Typeform didn't have a native integration with Google Sheets, so I leveraged Zapier to push the data into Google Sheets. Now there's native integration, which is actually working really well. So the next step here, and this is the most important step of this entire validation process project is to do qualitative coding. So what exactly is qualitative coding? So qualitative coding helps you make sense of unstructured data. What is unstructured data? Free-form text. Simple, basically. It's just this question over here. What were the biggest pain points? So for me, what I wanted to do, if you think back to like, I think the third slide when we're talking about pain points, is just a test to see if other people besides just myself had that problem statement, if it could resonate with other people as well. And so how does qualitative coding work? If you haven't heard of it, it's essentially just reading through a bunch of responses and tagging them and then grouping them into buckets and trying to identify patterns. So to show you over here, for example, these 3 responses all had to do with confidence. So I would tag them confidence issues, and then rinse and repeat across all of the different pain points. And by doing this, you can then do a cohort analysis and find trends across different segments of users, which is super helpful if you're trying to create accurate buyer, like more refined buyer personas later on, which can definitely help you with customer development and thinking about content ideas and so on and so forth. But just remember, like, if your pain is not shared by others, then it's not really worth making a business over. And even if it is shared with others, but they're not willing to pay for it, or if it's a pain point that there's a bunch of other solutions out there already solving that in an incredible fashion, which you could never actually kind of penetrate and compete with, then maybe that's also another cue to back out. But for better or for worse, a lot of other people had the same pain point as me, not being able to connect and bounce ideas with other people in growth. So I was super excited, and I moved on with my validation process. And the next step that I took, and I definitely everyone should take when thinking of a startup idea, is understand your competitors or your competitive landscape. Who else is out there solving the same problem? And it doesn't have to be in the exact same way. It can be in an alternative kind of way, like indirect kind of way. Like, for example, a lot of SaaS tools, their biggest competitor isn't really other SaaS tools. It's Google Sheets, or, well, that's kind of a SaaS tool, but like Excel, spreadsheets. So you have to make a list of all of these competitors, your direct and your indirect. And by this point, hopefully through the previous surveys, you'll get a lot of more ideas that maybe you hadn't thought of by just doing a Google search of what alternatives are that people are using to solve that pain point. But always the pain point is kind of at the fulcrum, at the core of everything that we're doing here. We're not just building a product because it's fun. So after you make your list of competitors, you should probably start dialogues with the users of your competitor. It's super helpful. So in this example over here, I did some market research on the inner workings of this platform called Clarity.fm. And I reached out to experts that were on their platform. And the goal here wasn't really to poach their users, since anyway, that kind of went counter to our core business model of curation anyway, but more it was to learn about in general, sort of the market of booking calls with experts. So I was pretty fairly confident at this point here that the problem was validated, but I wasn't sure that the business model, I wasn't sure of how I would tackle the business model problem, because should I take a membership approach, a commission? In general, is there a demand for this? So yeah, one of the things that I did is I used Phantom Buster, which is a growth hacking tool which does LinkedIn auto connections, to auto connect with a list of experts from Clarity.fm, and I used this as the sort of template that they would get, and it worked really, really well. So let's kind of break it down. Hello, insert here first name. I saw you have a profile on Clarity.fm. Are you getting a lot of calls on that lately? Super simple, yes or no question. Just doing some market research, kind of makes them feel a little bit comfortable. You're not going to pitch them or sell them, oh, okay, this guy's just trying to do some market research. Let's help him out. Thanks. So this is a template that worked incredibly well. I don't have data, unfortunately, on what my conversion rate for connection request attempt to actual connection request and then to conversation, but it was incredibly high. I have hundreds of people that I started conversations with, and a couple of them actually joined the platform as users, some as mentors as well. Danilo DeRosa is actually a mentor on GrowthMentor at the moment, this was very useful for really honing in on what our unique positioning in the market was. And you don't have to use LinkedIn. You can use email as well to ask a similar sort of question. And in terms of like how to actually find users of your competitors, there's this site called g2.com, G2 Crowd, and then Capterra. And I think that there's a way, if you're kind of savvy about it, to find out who these people are. I think the people that left reviews on the competitor sites, like you can find their LinkedIn, and from there, you can find their email address. But there's another speaker, another mentor, Danil Kopolec. I think I slaughtered his last name, and he's on the summit as well. And his talk is all about how to steal users from your competitors. So probably check that one out. I'm sure he knows a lot more than I do on how to find your competitors' users, but definitely talk to them. You will learn so much and read the reviews. So this is definitely part of the validation process. And the last thing that I want to talk about, which doesn't really have to go too much into like validation per se, but I want to mention it anyway, is your go-to-market strategy. And the reason why is because products, they just don't sell themselves. It's not enough to have an amazing product anymore. You have to have amazing marketing. You have to have amazing sales process. And just one thing though, I see a lot of the number one most common request on GrowthMentor for help is help on creating a go-to-market strategy. But I see a lot of people treating their go-to-market strategy kind of like a business, like how people would treat a business plan in the early 2000s. Oh, I need a business plan. I need a business plan in order to start something. You don't really need a 20-page business plan. You don't need a go-to-market strategy like the one that I made over here, which, by the way, if you click on any one of these different nodes, I actually have like 4 paragraphs of text describing, like I spent a week making this, crafting it. Do I regret it, spending so much time making this go-to-market strategy before I launched? Absolutely not. It gave me the confidence to keep pushing forward because I knew that, hey, at least I had a plan. I put the time and the effort in to do it. But if you want me to be honest, like I probably used 30%, if that, of all of the things that I had outlined over here. Because when you launch, everything changes. And the things that you think you're going to do in marketing, like it just ends up not happening. And it really does depend if you're VC funded or you're bootstrapped. I was bootstrapped, so it was like pretty much I was capped at what I was physically capable of doing with the small team that I had. But definitely create a go-to-market strategy. But it doesn't really have to be like this huge orchestration. So that's the talk. Hopefully you got some value out of it. Again, like there's so many other talks about growth marketing tactics. And I just really wanted to talk about this because I think that the fundamentals of any good growth strategy really are validating that the product is in need. The number one reason for failures in startups is no market needs. Based on CBinsights' latest report, 42% of startups that they did postmortems on failed just because there was no need for it. And it's just so sad because not everybody can afford to do this whole entrepreneurship game twice, right? They might have one shot. So to waste it because you didn't do that validation is just a real shame. So yeah, hopefully this gave some value. By the way, I'd be happy to chat with you if you want to talk about your startup idea. Take care. Have a good one.